This week, the Supreme Court delivered a historic decision, striking down the Trump-era tariffs that have shaped the nation's trade landscape for years. This ruling doesn't just change a policy, it reshapes the very foundation of U.S. and global trade, sending ripples through markets and boardrooms around the world. The impact of this decision goes far beyond the halls of government. It reaches into the aisles of your local grocery store, the assembly lines of American factories, and the shelves of retail stores across the country. Prices you see every day, the jobs people depend on, and the products we all use are all affected by this sweeping change. It also reverberates through our relationships with allies and competitors, influencing diplomatic ties and economic partnerships that have been carefully built over decades. For years, tariffs on steel and aluminum have been at the center of heated debates, driving up the cost of everyday goods and sparking tensions both at home and abroad. Now, with the Supreme Court's decision, that era comes to a close. But as one chapter ends, another begins. One filled with uncertainty and new challenges for industries and workers alike. The ruling marks a significant shift in America's trade philosophy, signaling a move away from protectionist measures and toward a more open approach to global commerce. Countries around the world are now rethinking their strategies, reassessing trade agreements, and preparing for a new era of competition and cooperation. Global supply chains, already tested by years of tariffs and recent disruptions, are bracing for another transformation as companies adapt to the new rules of the game. For American consumers, the effects are tangible. Tariffs have raised prices on cars, appliances, and construction materials, costs that are often passed directly to families and businesses. As these tariffs are lifted, many hope to see relief at the checkout counter and on construction sites where every dollar counts. The Supreme Court's move promises to ease the strain on household budgets, offering the possibility of lower prices and more choices for families across the nation. Yet, for workers in industries that were protected by these tariffs, the future is uncertain. They now face tough questions about job security and the path forward in a rapidly changing economy. The decision also redefines the balance of power between the President and Congress, raising important questions about who controls America's trade policy and how such decisions are made. By overturning the legal foundation of the tariffs, the court has set a new precedent that could shape future trade disputes and executive actions for years to come. The aftershocks of this landmark ruling will be felt not just in Washington but in the economy, in politics, and in the daily lives of millions of Americans. This is about more than numbers or legal arguments. It's about the direction America takes in an increasingly connected and competitive world. As the story continues to unfold, one thing is clear. The Supreme Court's decision marks a turning point, and its full impact is only beginning to be understood. To truly understand the Supreme Court's recent decision, it's important to take a step back and revisit the trade strategy that defined the Trump administration. This strategy not only shaped U.S. economic policy, but also set the stage for years of legal and political debate. In 2018, the administration imposed sweeping tariffs, 25% on imported steel and 10% on imported aluminum, using Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act. The justification? National security. The argument was that America's dependence on foreign metals could threaten its ability to defend itself in times of crisis. The primary goal was to protect and revitalize the U.S. steel and aluminum industries, which had been struggling for years. By making imported metals more expensive, the administration hoped to boost domestic production and reduce reliance on overseas suppliers. This policy was also part of a broader effort to revive American manufacturing and challenge what the administration saw as unfair global trade practices. It was a bold move that signaled a shift away from decades of free trade orthodoxy. However, the impact was mixed. While some domestic producers benefited from less competition, many American manufacturers who relied on imported steel and aluminum faced sharply higher costs. This forced them into difficult decisions. Should they absorb the losses, raise prices for consumers, or even cut jobs to stay afloat? The tariffs quickly became a source of division within the American business community. On one side were the producers of raw materials, who welcomed the protection. On the other were manufacturers and consumer goods companies, who saw their costs rise and their competitiveness threatened. The international response was swift. Key trading partners like Canada, Mexico, and the European Union retaliated with their own tariffs, targeting iconic American products and hitting U.S. farmers and exporters especially hard. This retaliation sparked protests and deepened the sense of uncertainty. What began as a targeted effort to protect one sector quickly escalated into a multi-front trade war, with negotiations and disputes erupting across the globe. Longtime allies suddenly found themselves at odds with the United States, turning economic partners into adversaries and complicating diplomatic relationships. The global trading system was thrown into turmoil. The ripple effects of these tariffs extended far beyond their intended targets, affecting supply chains, investment decisions, and economic growth both in the US and around the world. As the economic and political fallout grew, legal challenges mounted. The stage was set for a high-stakes showdown over the limits of presidential power and the future of US trade policy. And ultimately, it was these far-reaching consequences that brought the issue all the way to the Supreme Court, where the fate of the administration's trade strategy would finally be decided. The legal fight began soon after the tariffs were imposed. Steel importing businesses sued, arguing the president overstepped constitutional authority by using national security as a pretext for economic protectionism. The core issue: did Section 232 give the president too much unchecked power? Plaintiffs claimed Congress can't delegate its power to tax and regulate commerce without clear limits. The case, American Institute for International Steel v. United States, became a test of separation of powers. The Supreme Court agreed to hear it, signaling a willingness to revisit decades-old precedent. The outcome would redefine the boundaries between Congress and the president on trade. On September 22, 2025, the Supreme Court ruled 6-3 that the Trump-era tariffs were unconstitutional. The court found Section 232 gave the president too much unchecked authority, lacking clear guidelines from Congress. Chief Justice Roberts wrote, "National security cannot be a catch-all to bypass Congress's role in trade." The tariffs were immediately lifted, sending shockwaves through Washington. The ruling returns tariff authority to Congress, demanding explicit legislation for future trade actions. Dissenting justices warned this could limit the president's ability to respond to real threats. The legal battle is over, but the political fight is just beginning. Congress now faces the challenge of crafting new trade policy. The Supreme Court's decision has sent immediate economic ripples across the nation and beyond, creating a wave of reactions from various sectors. With tariffs now lifted, the prices of imported steel and aluminum have dropped significantly. This reduction in costs is a boon for U.S. manufacturers who rely heavily on these materials. Over time, these savings are expected to trickle down to consumers, potentially lowering the prices of everyday goods. As a result, consumers can anticipate gradual price relief on big-ticket items like cars and appliances, as well as on everyday essentials such as canned goods. This could lead to increased consumer spending, further stimulating the economy. Automakers and manufacturers are welcoming this change with open arms. They are projecting significant savings and potential growth opportunities, which could lead to expansion and job creation in the long run. However, the domestic steel and aluminum producers are now bracing for tough global competition. This has raised fears of potential job losses in industrial states, particularly in the Rust Belt, where the industry has been a cornerstone of the local economy. On the international front, allies such as the EU and Canada have celebrated the decision, viewing it as a step towards normalized trade relations. This could pave the way for stronger economic ties and collaboration. Some companies are considering bringing their supply chains back to the US, which could lead to increased investment in domestic manufacturing and infrastructure development. Despite these positive developments, tariffs on Chinese goods remain in place, keeping US-China trade tensions high. This ongoing conflict continues to cast a shadow over the global trade landscape. While the ruling has eased some friction with allies, it leaves the biggest trade conflict unresolved. Diplomatic efforts will be crucial in addressing these lingering issues. The global economy is in a state of flux with shifting dynamics and emerging uncertainties. Investors and businesses are closely monitoring these developments to navigate the changing landscape. For many, the next chapter of this economic saga depends on how Congress responds. Legislative actions could shape the future of trade policies and economic strategies. The stakes are high for workers, businesses, and consumers alike. The decisions made in the coming months will have far-reaching implications for the economic well-being of the nation. The world is watching America's next move with keen interest, as it will undoubtedly influence global economic trends and international relations. The Supreme Court's decision has upended the political landscape in Washington. Congress now must reclaim its authority over trade, igniting a fierce legislative battle. Free trade advocates push for limits on presidential power and lower barriers, while economic nationalists demand new protections for American jobs. Senator Jane Collins calls for modern trade policy that boosts competitiveness without hurting consumers. Senator Mark Johnson vows to restore presidential authority to protect U.S. industries. The debate will shape the 2026 midterms, forcing candidates to pick sides. Industrial states demand protection, port and farm states want open markets. The legal fight is over, but the political firestorm is just beginning. Experts are divided on the ruling's impact. Dr. Emily Carter sees it as a tax cut for businesses and consumers, easing inflation and spurring investment. She urges targeted support for workers facing new competition. Professor Michael Chen calls it a landmark for separation of powers, forcing future presidents to work with Congress on trade. National security voices like Dr. David Petraeus warn that losing tariff tools could weaken America's industrial base in a crisis. Labor leaders argue the decision puts factory jobs at risk, urging Congress to restore trade protections. The ruling's effects are complex, no easy answers, only trade-offs. Every path forward will require tough choices. The debate now moves from the courts to the Capitol. America's economic future hangs in the balance. The Supreme Court's decision hits home for families and workers. For consumers, lower tariffs mean more affordable cars, appliances, and groceries. For steelworkers in towns like western Pennsylvania, the loss of tariffs threatens jobs and community stability. Small businesses like craft breweries benefit from cheaper materials and new growth opportunities. The ruling reverses who wins and loses, creating new pressures and possibilities. The national debate: should we prioritize low prices or protect American jobs? The answer depends on where you live and what you do. The challenge is finding a policy that supports both families and workers. Trade policy is personal, and its impact is felt in every household. The Supreme Court has handed the future of trade policy to Congress, and to you. The debate over jobs, prices, and America's role in the world is just beginning. Stay informed, know where your representatives stand, and engage in the conversation. The choices Congress makes will shape our economy for years to come. Your voice matters, at the ballot box and beyond. This is a rare chance for a national debate about our economic future. Let's make it count.